I learned at 65 that grief and betrayal can arrive holding hands, and I discovered this truth while standing in my sister's bedroom 3 days after her funeral, watching her husband methodically search through her jewelry box, like a man hunting for treasure he believed was rightfully his. Don't forget to like this video and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. My name is Ruth, and for 47 years, my younger sister Caroline was my best friend, my confidant, and the person who understood me better than anyone else in this world. We grew up sharing a bedroom in Providence, Rhode Island, whispering secrets in the dark. And even after we both married and moved to different neighborhoods in Portland, Oregon, we still talked every single day. Every single day. When Caroline was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months ago, I took early retirement from the Portland Public Library system, where I'd worked for 32 years. I didn't hesitate. I moved into her guest room, and I was there for every doctor's appointment, every chemotherapy session, every midnight panic attack. I held her hand through it all. Her husband, Thomas, was there too, of course. On the surface, he played the devoted husband role perfectly. He'd arrive at the hospital with flowers, sit quietly during treatments, post touching updates on Facebook about their journey. But I saw things. I saw how he checked his phone constantly during her worst moments. I saw how he'd leave early from the hospital, claiming work emergencies. I saw the way his jaw tightened whenever Caroline mentioned changing her will. The night before Caroline died, she squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left and whispered, "The blue envelope. In the library book. You'll understand." She passed away the next morning, September 15th, with me holding one hand and Thomas holding the other. The funeral was beautiful. Over 200 people came to celebrate Caroline's life. Thomas gave a moving eulogy that had people in tears. He thanked me publicly for being such a devoted sister, for sacrificing my retirement plans to care for Caroline. I felt genuine warmth toward him in that moment. Grief has a way of making you forget the small things that bothered you. That warmth lasted exactly 3 days. On the third day after the funeral, I went to Caroline's house to start the heartbreaking work of sorting through her belongings. Thomas had asked me to come. He'd said he couldn't face it alone. When I arrived at 2 in the afternoon, I found him in Caroline's bedroom, her jewelry box open on the bed, her drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. He jumped, actually jumped, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Oh, Ruth, you're early. I was just looking for some documents Caroline mentioned. Estate papers. The lawyer has all the estate papers," I said slowly. "We met with him yesterday." Thomas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Right. Yes, of course. I just thought there might be other things. Bank statements. Investment records." He paused, watching me carefully. Caroline mentioned she had some accounts I didn't know about. That's when I remembered. The blue envelope. The library book. "I see," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Would you like some help looking?" No, he said quickly, closing the jewelry box. "Actually, I need to run some errands. Why don't you start with the closet? I'll handle the papers." After he left, I went straight to Caroline's personal library. My sister collected first editions, and her prized possession was a 1,925 copy of The Great Gatsby. I pulled it from the shelf with shaking hands, and there it was, a blue envelope tucked inside the front cover. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter from Caroline dated 2 years ago, a key to a safety deposit box, and the name of a law firm in Seattle I'd never heard of. I sat down on Caroline's reading chair and opened the letter. My sister's familiar handwriting blurred as tears filled my eyes. "Dearest Ruthie," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was still here. I need you to know the truth about my marriage, about Thomas, and about the decisions I made to protect what matters most." The letter was 4 pages long. With each paragraph, my understanding of my sister's life shifted like a kaleidoscope turning, revealing patterns I'd never seen before. Caroline explained that 6 years ago, Thomas had started gambling, not casually, compulsively. He'd lost over $80,000 before she'd discovered it. He'd promised to stop, sworn on their marriage. She'd believed him. Then, 3 years ago, she'd found out he'd remortgaged their house without telling her, taking out $200,000 in equity. The money was gone, disappeared into online poker sites and sports betting apps. I was so ashamed, she wrote. I didn't tell you because you'd always warned me about Thomas, back when we first got engaged. You'd said something felt off about how he talked about money. You were right, Ruthie. You were always right. My hands trembled as I continued reading. Caroline had consulted with a divorce attorney, but then she'd been diagnosed with cancer. Divorce proceedings would have been complicated, expensive, and emotionally devastating when she needed to focus on treatment. But she also knew she couldn't trust Thomas with her inheritance from our parents or the life insurance policies. So she'd made a plan. Quietly, carefully, over the course of several months, Caroline had worked with the Seattle law firm to create an irrevocable trust. She'd transferred her inheritance from our parents, approximately $450,000, into this trust. She'd also taken out a new life insurance policy, one Thomas didn't know about, with a death benefit of $750,000. All of it had been placed in a trust with me as the trustee and beneficiary. The trust documents are in the safety deposit box, her letter explained. Everything is legal and properly executed. Thomas will receive the house, which has a mortgage he doesn't know I know about, and the life insurance policy he's aware of, which will pay out $100,000, barely enough to cover the mortgage and his debts. The rest, the trust, is yours. But Ruthie, this is what I need you to understand. I'm not giving it to you to keep. I'm giving it to you to use wisely, for the causes we both believe in, for the community programs at the library you always wanted to expand, for the women's shelter Mom volunteered at. I trust you to do good with it. And I trust you to stand firm when Thomas comes asking. Because he will. He's going to come for you, and you need to be ready. The letter ended with Caroline's signature and a postscript. I love you, big sister. Thank you for being my strength when I had none. Now be strong for both of us. I sat in that chair for over an hour, processing everything. My sweet sister had spent the last years of her life not just fighting cancer, but protecting her legacy from her own husband. The betrayal she must have felt. The loneliness of keeping such a secret. I carefully folded the letter and put it back in the envelope along with the key. I had decisions to make, and I needed to think clearly. The next morning, I drove to Seattle, 3 hours north, and met with the attorney whose name Caroline had provided. His name was James Chen, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who'd clearly cared about my sister. Mrs. Caroline spoke very highly of you, he said as we sat in his office. She was quite clear about her wishes. Everything in the trust is yours to manage. The documentation is ironclad. Your brother-in-law has no legal claim to these assets. He doesn't know any of this exists, I said. No, James confirmed. And my advice? Keep it that way as long as possible. Let him receive his life insurance payout. Let the estate settle. There's no reason to disclose the trust unless legally required. And it won't be. I thought about this. He'll figure out something's missing. He was searching her room yesterday. Let him search, James said. The trust documents are here in the safety deposit box. All the transfers were completed years ago. Even if he hires a forensic accountant, all they'll find is that Caroline made some transfers to a trust, which is perfectly legal and beyond the statute of limitations for any challenge. I drove home with the safety deposit key in my purse, feeling like I was carrying both a burden and a gift. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. I helped Thomas sort through Caroline's belongings. I organized her memorial service at the library, where over 100 people came to share stories about how Caroline had helped them find the perfect book, how she'd run the children's reading program, how she'd made the library feel like a second home. Thomas gave another touching speech. He cried. People hugged him. I watched it all, remembering Caroline's letter, seeing him with new eyes. The life insurance company paid out his policy, the $100,000 Caroline had mentioned. I heard through mutual friends that Thomas seemed disappointed by the amount, that he'd expected more. Then, 3 weeks after the funeral, Thomas called me. Ruth, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come to the house? When I arrived, Thomas had paperwork spread across the dining room table. Financial statements, bank records, tax returns. Sit down, he said, and his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. We need to discuss Caroline's assets. Okay, I said, sitting across from him. I've been going through everything, and money is missing. A lot of money. He pushed a paper toward me. This is a statement from 2019 showing Caroline had $460,000 in an investment account from your parents' estate. That account is empty. The money was transferred out in 2020. Transferred where? I asked, keeping my voice steady. That's what I need you to tell me, Thomas said, leaning forward. You and Caroline were close. You talked every day. She must have told you something. About her finances? I shook my head. Caroline and I didn't discuss money much. Don't lie to me, Ruth. His voice hardened. You were living in our house for over a year. You had access to everything. Did she give you money? Did she transfer assets to you? My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. Years of dealing with difficult library patrons had taught me how to maintain composure. Are you accusing me of something, Thomas? I'm saying that money didn't just disappear. Caroline was sick. She was on pain medication. She wasn't thinking clearly. If someone influenced her to move money around, someone like me? I interrupted. You think I manipulated my dying sister? I think she might have made decisions she wouldn't have made if she'd been healthy, Thomas said. And I think those decisions can be challenged. That money should have come to me, as her spouse. It's community property. I stood up. I'm not having this conversation, Thomas. If you have concerns about Caroline's estate, talk to her probate attorney. I already did, he snapped. They claim they don't know anything about any transfers. But I've hired my own attorney, and we're going to find that money. And if we find out you had anything to do with it, I'll sue you for every penny. I left without another word, my hands shaking as I drove home. That night, I called James Chen. He knows something's missing. He's threatening to sue. Let him, James said calmly. The trust is legally sound. Even if he discovers its existence, he has no grounds to challenge it. Caroline created it when she was of sound mind, years before her illness. And frankly, his own financial history works against him. If he pushes this, we can present evidence of his gambling, his secret remortgage, his debts. Caroline wouldn't want me to air their dirty laundry, I said. Caroline wanted you to stand firm, James reminded me. That's why she planned so carefully. Over the next 2 months, Thomas made good on his threat. He filed a petition in probate court, claiming that assets were missing from Caroline's estate and that I had unduly influenced her. He hired an attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse cases, despite the fact that Caroline had only been 62 when she died and had been mentally sharp until her last few weeks. It was horrible. Friends who'd known us for decades started taking sides. Thomas told anyone who would listen that I'd stolen from Caroline, that I'd taken advantage of my dying sister's vulnerability. People I'd worked with for years started looking at me with suspicion. I couldn't defend myself without revealing Caroline's secrets, without exposing what Thomas had done. So I stayed silent, and I let the attorneys handle it. The discovery process was brutal. Thomas's attorney subpoenaed bank records, tax returns, emails, but here's what they found. A clean, clear trail of Caroline making deliberate, documented decisions 3 years before her death, when she was healthy and employed as a middle school teacher. They found the signed trust documents. They found notarized statements. They found her meeting notes with James Chen. And then James Chen's firm did something Caroline had prepared for. They revealed Thomas's financial history, the gambling losses, the secret mortgage, the debts Caroline had quietly paid off, the cash withdrawals that coincided with trips to the casino. The petition was dismissed. The judge noted that Caroline had every right to place her separate property into a trust, that the documentation showed clear intent and mental capacity, and that there was no evidence of undue influence. He also noted, rather pointedly, that Thomas's own financial misconduct provided Caroline with reasonable motivation for her estate planning decisions. Thomas was ordered to pay court costs. The ruling was final, but I still felt hollow. This wasn't the victory Caroline had wanted. She hadn't wanted exposure. She hadn't wanted Thomas publicly humiliated. She'd just wanted to protect what was hers and ensure it would do good in the world. I sat in James Chen's office after the ruling, holding a copy of the judge's decision. What now? I asked. Now you fulfill Caroline's wishes, James said. Use the trust funds the way she wanted. So I did. I established the Caroline Mitchell Memorial Fund at the Portland Public Library, endowing programs for underserved children and funding literacy initiatives. I donated $200,000 to the women's shelter where our mother had volunteered, specifically for their financial literacy and independence program. I set up scholarship funds at Caroline's middle school for students pursuing education careers. And I kept enough to ensure my own financial security, to travel like Caroline and I had always planned to do together, to live well without fear. Thomas sold the house, he had no choice, with the mortgage he'd taken out and moved to California. I heard through mutual friends that he'd remarried within a year, a wealthy widow he'd met at a grief support group. I hoped, for her sake, that he'd changed, but I suspected he hadn't. I think about Caroline every day. I visit her grave every week, usually on Wednesday afternoons, which was our lunch date day. I tell her about the kids using the library programs, about the women getting help at the shelter, about the scholarship recipients, and I thank her for trusting me, for knowing I would stand firm when standing firm felt impossible. I'm 67 now, 2 years older than I was when all this began. People sometimes ask me if I regret how things unfolded, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I feel guilty about the money. I tell them what I've come to understand. Caroline didn't give me a gift. She gave me a responsibility. She trusted me to be strong enough to honor her wishes, even when it meant being accused, mistrusted, and dragged through legal proceedings. She trusted me to see it through. And here's what I learned through all of it. Wealth isn't just about money. It's about having the resources to protect yourself, to make choices, to say no when someone tries to control you. Caroline spent years without that power in her marriage. The trust she created wasn't just about finances. It was about reclaiming autonomy, about making sure that even in death, she had the final say in what happened to her life's work. Some people think 67 is too old to start over, to rebuild a social circle after a scandal, to create new purposes. Those people haven't been paying attention. I've never been more purposeful. I volunteer at the women's shelter 3 days a week. I mentor new librarians. I travel, like Caroline and I planned, and I carry her memory to every place we'd circled on our maps. Last month, I went to New Orleans, a city Caroline had always wanted to visit. I sat in a cafe in the French Quarter, drinking chicory coffee and eating beignets, and I felt her presence so strongly it brought tears to my eyes. An older woman at the next table noticed and asked if I was all right. "I'm wonderful," I told her, and I meant it. "I'm living a life my sister helped me build." She smiled. "That's a beautiful legacy." "It is. It really is. If there's anything I want people to take from my story, it's this. Trust your instincts about the people in your life. Caroline knew something was wrong in her marriage, and she acted to protect herself. Don't wait for a crisis to safeguard what matters. And if someone you love trusts you with their legacy, honor it, even when honoring it is hard. Also, know that being 60, 70, 80 doesn't mean you're done making choices, fighting battles, or standing up for what's right. Some of the strongest, most determined women I know discovered their power in their later years, when they'd finally stopped caring what people thought and started caring about what actually mattered. I'm living proof that life doesn't end at 65. Sometimes it's just beginning. Sometimes you find your purpose in keeping promises to people you love. Sometimes you learn that grief and joy, loss and abundance, endings and beginnings can all exist in the same moment, in the same breath. Caroline saved me, even as I thought I was caring for her. She gave me purpose, direction, and the resources to make a difference. Every child who learns to read through our library programs, every woman who escapes financial abuse through the shelter's programs, every teacher we help train through the scholarships carries a piece of Caroline forward into the world. That's not just legacy. That's immortality. And as for Thomas? I heard recently that his new wife hired a forensic accountant before they married and insisted on a prenuptial agreement. She learned from someone else's mistakes. I hope he's finally getting the help he needs. I really do. But that's not my concern anymore. My concern is living well, giving generously, and making sure my sister's final gift changes as many lives as possible. I'm 67 years old, and I've never felt more powerful, more purposeful, or more free. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonates with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, it's never too late to take control of your life, to protect what matters, and to honor the people who believed in you.